Looks like we're recording here, so let's get on with it. This is chapter 9. I'm actually re-recording it because when I did it using YouTube video, it stopped and then I had to start it again. There's no way to continue. It's two separate things. So I'm just doing this on the camera, and then we're going to find out if I can upload it. But let's start. This is chapter 9. This is dealing with it in the book, Getting It, 8 Facts to Fuel Recovery. The illustration from this chapter, for this chapter, is my little friend. If I had a caption for this as a drawing, I would call it addictive problem solving. Well, in this case, alcoholic problem solving. But the quote underneath is from many people in many programs: alcohol, drugs, whatever I'm addicted to, wasn't my problem. It was my solution. I'm sure everybody that watches this has probably heard that by now. So the chapter is called Dealing with It, a phrase that I hear very often in my office and in meetings. This chapter offers you a huge slice of the willingness pie. You may have already noticed the recipe calls for a lot of the same ingredients as humble pie. So be prepared to gag, to take small bites. Put the book down when you need to chew on something for a while. For starters, few adults want to admit that they are not competent in the business of living, that adult life is too much for them. But what else can it mean when we say screw it, or I'll just have one and check out from our problems? My translation would be, I cannot, I will not, I should not have to cope with whatever the heck I'm upset about. It's about time we define terms here, even if this is just a blog or something like it and not a real book. Coping, I should have put that in quotation marks because I'm giving you a definition. Coping means dealing with what bothers me in a healthy, wise, effective, realistic way. Bother is in quotes. Bother only happens when something is not how I wanted it to be. Frustration. If something were just how I wanted it to be, why would it bother me? How could it? So all coping really means is dealing with frustrations. Broken hearts, broken shoelaces, the hole in the ozone layer, and all bother really means is an emotion that wouldn't happen unless we want something and don't get it, or get something we don't want. I get angry because you didn't do what I wanted. I'm bored because I want excitement or stimulation. I'm lonely because I want company, perhaps with benefits, to relieve another frustration. I am sad because I lost something or someone I wanted to keep. I'm afraid because I might not get what I want. Company or, quote, benefits, unquote. Worse, I may get what I don't want. Rejection for both. You get the idea. Depression, guilt, and anxiety may be more complex, but in every case of this thing we call bother, we want something to be different, even if it is ourselves, even if we don't know what it is. Resentment? I want you to take the blame, to apologize, to suffer, and to change. I want me to be as pure as the driven snow, innocent, with no reason to feel guilt, to apologize, or to change me. At some level, I want to be the victim, and I loathe any idea of me as the perpetrator. I want nothing to be my fault. To cope is to actually get over, to get relief from the frustrations of life in healthy and effective ways. And it has 3 steps. 1, face what bothers you, the frustrations. Look inside to see what you are wanting. Look outside to see what you are getting. If you have not faced the gap between what you want and what you get, how can you have even face the real problem, the very thing that makes the problem real for you. So 2, sort your frustration into 2 piles. The stuff you have no physical control over and must accept, and the stuff you may have enough control over to be able to change, or at least to try, as long as it won't make things worse. Worse in this instance means to create an even more painful frustration than the one you already have. 3, pick up the tools from recovery or counseling or anywhere else and go to work on cleaning up those 2 piles, pursuing the clear and separate goals of accepting this or changing that. Yes, I have just summarized that precious gem of common sense, the Serenity Prayer. As if that were not bad enough, now I'm going to explain it. First, it's not always a simple matter to know what bothers us, or even that we are bothered at all. You may have to work backward from a vague uneasiness or a mysterious urge to drink or use, just to trace some event or feeling you'd forgotten about, to put your finger on which desire is gnawing you this time. You may even need to use a set of tools called, quote, psychotherapy, unquote, to do this. Your shrink may not be able to get you sober, but he or she can sure as hell help you see what is bugging you so much you feel like saying F it, or help you look for the pain that has made you think of just one painkiller. Once you do know what bothers you, here is how healthy coping works. If you have enough control and you won't make things worse, you can make something be how you want it to be. It just takes some work on your part. This result is called satisfaction. Put that in quotes too. It is the opposite of frustration, and your bother will cease when you get it. On the other hand, if you have no physical control over something, you cannot give yourself satisfaction. You cannot change the thing that bothers you to be how you want it to be. Well, how could you? But there is something you can change, even if it takes time and effort. Yourself. Your wanting. This is all we really mean by acceptance. That magical moment when you stop wanting what you cannot have because you cannot have it. The thing that bothered you is still there, stubbornly refusing to be as you wish, yet you're no longer frustrated because your wanting is no longer there. You have found another opposite to frustration. You have taken no for an answer from life. At least this one time, you have accepted, quote, life on life's terms, unquote. More important, every time you do it, you increase your ability and willingness to do it again. Not only does it work when you work it, but the more you work it, the more it works. The bad news, there's no off switch in the human brain for our desires, for saying no to the part that wants what it wants. I know I cannot make quarterback Russell Wilson take back that disastrous throw at the end of Super Bowl 49, but I may still want to. And that frustration may sting me every time some heartless talk show host brings it up. The good news, you can work at acceptance. There are tools, an almost infinite number that you can use and keep using on any problem that bothers you. But you have to accept that acceptance is necessary. There is no plan C. That it takes time. And that you have to accept your own lack of acceptance while you work on it. Once you do, all that remains is the choice of tools at this very moment. For people blessed to get this basic fact, there is always, 110% of the time, something you can do about anything that bothers you. There's never a time when there is nothing you can do. Great. life-saving news if you hate feeling helpless. You can always sort out what must be accepted from what must be changed or might be changed. You can always pick up tools that help with getting unstuck in one process or the other, accepting or changing. True, the relief may not come as quickly as it once did from your fix. There won't be a rush. Well, I don't know if that's always true, but never mind, I didn't clue that in the book. People in recovery who understand any version of this secret are known by their reactions. When their team loses, they do not relapse. They say that corny little prayer, they go to a meeting, call a sponsor, pull out a 12-step book, or find a recovery meeting. Maybe they look around for another addict/alcoholic to help. WebIsTheTruth.com reports 12-step calls increased 36.5% in Seattle compared to the rest of the country in the first 3 months after Super Bowl 49. Yes, I made that up. A fictitious illustration of people recognizing the need to go to work on their frustration, not to the dope man, the bar, the casino, the donut shop, or the strip club. Perhaps, no, that's not what it says. People who do not see a need to learn and use healthier coping skills, who have not swallowed this piece of the step one pie. Oh, with a question mark. Let me try that whole sentence again. People who do not see a need to learn and use healthier coping skills, who have not swallowed this piece of the step one pie. Hear the rising voice, the inflection that says this is a question. When life deviates from their plan or schedule, they do nothing new. Some sweep their frustrations under the rug until the thought of just one sounds reasonable again. Others grind their molars and let the frustration mount until they say, F it. When first abstinent, they rely on willpower and staying busy. No need for all those meetings. If they go, no point in getting a sponsor or working steps. Call someone when upset? I don't want to bother anyone with my problems. Or, I can handle my own problems. We call it white-knuckle sobriety, whether it's about alcohol or any other abstinence. And what are the white knuckles gripping so doggedly? The unrelieved frustration and the silent craving that accumulate during the process we call relapse. Are there people who coast all the way to the grave without 12-step maintenance? Sure. The point of this whole book is not that no one ever got or stayed sober without 12-step recovery. The point is only that those people who do keep working realize certain things about their own disease and recovery that keep them working. At least 8 things. As I said in an earlier chapter, the federal government once spent about $30 million to figure out what treatment works best for which sort of alcoholic. Not a whole lot of luck there. What they did show was that a 12-step approach worked better and more cheaply and longer than the others, and that those still sober at the end of the study had one primary thing in common, regardless of what treatment they had received. They were going to meetings. Yikes! I haven't mentioned what AA itself says about the 8th realization. The 8th slice of the step 1 willingness pie. A lot of people see, almost from the beginning, that they use their fix to fix themselves when upset. What may take a lifetime of suffering is the willingness to learn even one other way, much less keep that willingness alive. This is in quotes. Let's find out why. I cannot cope and need to learn how and to hang on to the willingness for dear life, unquote. Big slice right there. Maybe half of the pie. The commonly shared confession that alcohol and drugs, whatever, was not my problem, it was my solution, the one we read at the beginning of the chapter, names the challenge of coping pretty well. So does the complaint that, quote, I always felt like my life came without the instruction manual everyone else seemed to get, unquote. But neither mentions the need for maintenance. Yes, the big book says what we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition, unquote. Something the recovery gurus may not tell you. Maintenance includes renewal of the willingness to use the tools for coping long after we have learned them. Pretty hard to imagine a spiritual condition that does not include readiness to pick up tools when poo-poo hits the fan. More than one-time recovery fanatic has gotten complacent, let meetings and recoveries slide for a while. The tools don't go anywhere. The willingness to use them is a different story, one often ending in effort, or I'll just have one. As a detox patient with recent experience once said, quote, "If you are coasting, you must be going downhill," unquote. To give credit where credit is due, Bill and his anonymous co-authors spelled out a core psychological trait, one that sets the alcoholic addict up for disastrous coping, regardless of the addiction. The program of recovery tackles this trait directly and relentlessly through the steps, the meetings, sponsors, and slogans. Half of what recovery programs do helps us to remember not to take the first drink, drug, whatever. The other half reduces this trait enough to present the effort relapse. And then parentheses, if we have swallowed enough willingness pie, unquote. Here's the trait, quote, "The alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot," and, quote, "we must be rid of this selfishness or it kills us," unquote. Self-will run riot, sometimes known as low frustration tolerance, is the fatal attitude. Those who own it often describe themselves, quote, "I want what I want when I want it," unquote, or "my way or the highway," unquote. The legendary Type A personality would also feel right at home in this group. How about you? In other words, the person with an overload of self-will rejects acceptance itself as a matter of principle. Lack of skill, craving, immaturity, entitlement, genetics, trauma, or all of the above. It is relatively unimportant what causes this, but it is life and death for the person who has it to get that he or she has got it. Ownership. If self-will run riot is mine, then there is work that only I can do to protect myself from it. If I do not, I will never find the only relief there is from frustrations I can't control. Buddhists say life is dukkha, usually translated as, quote, "suffering," unquote. It seems that it could about as easily be translated as life is frustrating. Day in, day out. If I am an addict with no tool or even a concept for acceptance, my frustration bubble will bulge until it bursts. And when it does, the sound that explodes out of me will almost often be unprintable. The action I take will be the only fix that I think in that moment works for me. And how are these 12-step programs going to help? The chapter on, quote, uncaring, unquote, spelled out surrender as an antidote to self-will run riot and the effort relapse. The wishful rejection of reality is about as willful as you can get. In effect, I'm going to believe what I want to believe, and to hell with the facts. So surrender also helps prevent the willful/wishful relapse of one won't hurt. Before surrender, I battle constantly to get reality to bend to my will. Afterward, I humbly look to it for guidance and direction, with or without a deity to please. In actual practice, surrender helps me accept what is going to happen before it does. That alone evaporates much anxiety. But every now and then, reality breaches the limits of my surrender. Then I need acceptance tools to cool off the frustration, to get my serenity back. One of those tools is 12-Step Recovery's secret weapon: humor. Describing in meetings the absurdity of our latest efforts to command the universe, that's actually a sentence fragment. Humor. Describing in meetings the absurdity of our latest effort to command the universe. This has to fall just below praying, sharing in general, and helping others as a powerful, quote, serenity restoration tool. Excuse me, should have taken one of my lozenges. Just as the program provides a prosthetic or artificial memory, so it provides an acceptance transplant. But our emotional immune system is fierce. The new acceptance organ needs a lot of post-transplant care. That will likely include spiritual practice and spiritual community. I, in quotes, plugs into we, in quotes, in a meeting or community, in prayer or meditation or other spiritual practice, including song, in service or in 12-step calls. Quote, we, unquote, plug into one another because each one of us realizes or gets that we need that. If we didn't, why would we be there? And if we don't, we won't. Spirituality has invited humans to acceptance since we started decorating cave walls. Science can tell us what is out there or in there or nowhere. It does not yet tell us how to accept any of it, even if it can measure how much acceptance we have. That is why all addicts, or even human beings, may benefit from a, quote, spiritual awakening. Whether they open the sesame of relapse with one won't hurt or F it. So the question is, does this chapter make sense to you? Does it fit your experience? Does your track record include stumbling over frustration and saying F it, reaching for your favorite whatever instead of a helping hand? Have you actually been willing to reach for a tool instead of whatever, only to realize too late it was gone? How many times? Maybe you just can't convince yourself you need those meetings or those steps. If not, are you willing to consider that going it alone is sort of an experiment? That you may actually be testing whether you need help to keep your motivation fresh. That you may be testing your willingness to pick up a tool rather than say screw it and grabbing your favorite fix. What if you do relapse again? Will you let your own experience tell you that you may be in that chosen class of addict, alcoholic, whatever, the kind who need one another and their shared program to stay abstinent? That you might even be in danger of one day walking around with a stupid grin on your face and an obnoxious spring in your step, calling yourself a grateful addict, alcoholic, whatever. Grateful. If this prospect fills you with more loathing than enthusiasm, dear reader, don't worry. In the beginning, most of us seem to approach 12-step membership about as eagerly as Groucho Marx. You know, when he said, this is a quote, one of my favorites, "I would not belong to a club that would have me as a member," unquote. And that is it for Chapter 9. Let's see if I can stop it and actually upload it to YouTube from photography. Bye.